when you bring together a world-class academic, an innovative architect, and a socially conscious developer. Three's Company. Or a panel discussion exploring dimensions of health and wellness in the built environment. Today we have our setup goes as follows. We'll have 3 presentations from our panelists, followed by some questions from this morning's keynotes, and then questions from the audience. We really would like to get input from you. So after the questions from the keynotes, throw your hands up and we'll get a mic to you and we'll get a lively and engaging conversation going. So, our first panelist is Dr. Beverly Sandalek, Associate Dean, Environmental Design Planning, Interim Director of the EVDS PhD Program, and Research Leader of the EVDS Urban Lab, Faculty of Environmental Design, University of Calgary. Please welcome Bev Sandalek.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here, and I've titled my talk, Morphology is Destiny, because it seems that the morphology or the form of the urban environment that we're talking about has so many influences on the quality of life and the quality of urban form. I'm not quite sure. Middle one? There we go, okay. I'm going to base a lot of what I'm talking about in these 10 or 12 minutes on 3 projects that we've been working on. One is called Eco-Euphoria, and that was looking at economic implications of improving urban form to increase physical activity. The second one was about social connectivity in urban form. And the third one is a large project that we did called the Calgary Project that's about all kinds of aspects of Calgary's urban form. And all of these were done in the Urban Lab with colleagues, many of who are in the audience now. We often talk about walking as sort of the benchmark for urban form. You know, it's the easiest way to get around. A lot of people think it's the silver bullet to health and wellness. But as an article in the most recent Atlantic Cities journal was showing, it's not that simple. There are a lot of other factors involved in making us happy and healthy. So just finding a place to play, finding a place to sit, finding a little bit of respite in the natural environment, those are just as important as being able to walk. So the urban environment that we live in has evolved a lot over the last, especially the last 50 or 60 years. This little series of paintings shows probably a fictional place about how people locate in an area because of the natural environment and the sense of place. And then over time, certain kinds of processes and factors start to make it not as attractive. And some of those factors that we can notice are the change in the grain and scale of development. So going from a small Main Street kind of commercial area where you can walk to something that's highly auto-dependent and not all that pleasant to be in. Even churches, neighborhood churches going to a real big box model. This city center church, or Center Street church, can't remember the name, sorry, but surrounded by parking lots is a totally different model. We've had a net increase in the amount of open space in neighborhoods, but a decrease in the kinds of open space. So if you're a young kid playing soccer, your needs are met really well, but if you're someone else, maybe not so much. Street standards have changed too, and this is pretty dramatic. This is taken just facing 2 different directions in the town of Vulcan. This is the only non-Calgary slide I've got. But seeing what was happening pre-1960s with street trees and sidewalks, and then the street standards just change. The sidewalks don't even match up, and we get rid of things like street trees. So all of this is really the emphasis of the private realm at the expense of the public realm. And that's the kind of environment that can really support a kind of quality of life and way of life that we might be talking about. So we got interested in this and did a study of the evolution of Calgary neighborhoods, and we found that the different neighborhood types corresponded to various eras in city building. And Calgary's an interesting city to study. It's really simple, kind of concentric rings out from the center. So the downtown grid being the oldest, and then different types working your way outward. And we'll look at those in a little more detail. And oftentimes when we talk about walkability, we're concentrating on neighborhoods, but it's also the downtown that's so vital. These are beautiful slides, right? You know, we've got Barclay Mall, Stephen Avenue, the River Path system, that wonderful alley of trees outside of City Hall that we all like to point to. And that looks really great. But with the good also comes the bad and the ugly. And too much of the downtown is inhospitable, pretty banal, not the kind of environment that would support that quality of life that we're looking for. So my contention here is that public space that builds on landscape, those strong landscape elements, does a lot more for well-being of residents than big projects. So it's not all that hard. So Calgary has this amazing resource of the river path system along the Bow and the Elbow. We've got a few high-quality good streets that a lot of streetscaping attention has been put into. What would happen if more of those streets become high-quality streets? And so you can walk right across the downtown and you won't run into those bleak areas. Or what happens if the whole thing, if the whole city is like that? Just dreams, I guess, right now. And I know that Dave's probably going to be talking about some of the city plans. But back to neighborhoods, three basic types of neighborhood form that have different street patterns, different block patterns, and different qualities. So the inner city grid, that's the one that has the separated sidewalks, street trees, really walkable grid. Post-war warped grid is starting to have a few more crescents and cul-de-sacs, and then by the time you get to the 1980s, most neighborhoods, with very, very few exceptions, have that hierarchical street pattern and maybe one sidewalk if you're lucky, and maybe some street trees, but not likely. So we mapped the Walksheds. How far can you walk within a prescribed amount of time or distance? And there was a real difference in these three neighborhood types. So Hillhurst, being a representative of this inner city grid, has a pretty healthy Walkshed. It would correspond roughly to what you would get from walk score, which is that radius, crowflies radius that isn't terribly accurate. Post-World War II, slightly smaller Walksheds, and by the time you get to the 1980s, drastically reduced Walkshed sizes. And then in mapping those, back to this city plan, you can see that the darker polygons are the older areas, and they have the largest Walksheds, and then they become decreasing as you move out. Different way of looking at it, this top series of diagrams shows that the clusters of Walkshed types in grids are a lot larger, somewhere up into the 4 and 5 square kilometers, and curvilinear a lot less. And the bottom chart, the bottom line, I guess, is that the curvilinear have about half the size of the Walkshed of grid, and that's pretty dramatic. We also looked at the qualities of that Walkshed, because it's no good to have a large area you can walk to if there's nowhere where to walk to, if it isn't pleasant. So this was the best summer job I think that these students ever had, where they rode their bikes and walked around every neighborhood in Calgary at the time. There were 230 of them, and scored every neighborhood according to a number of different metrics. So mix of uses, visual interest, presence of street trees, presence of sidewalks, and so on, from the worst to the best. And we mapped that as well. And we found the same kind of map, that the higher quality neighborhoods, the dark red, were found in the inner city grid, and then as you worked your way out, it became poorer in quality. And that seemed pretty astounding to us, since I think everybody would acknowledge that we're one of the richest cities in the richest province, in one of the richest countries in the world. These are not third world problems that we're dealing with. This is basic stuff, and we're not able to do it well yet. So we also started to calculate the cost. What would it cost to improve those neighborhoods? So we redesigned everything, provided sidewalks, provided street trees, changed the block structure so that it was shorter blocks. And the grid, average cost of retrofitting this neighborhood is about $26 million. For the warp grid, about $67,000. And curvilinear, if you wanted to retrofit it to the gold standard of walkability, be about $115 million per neighborhood, which is a lot of money. And most of the cost is in changing block patterns, so reducing the distance that people have to go before they turn a corner. So the bottom line, it costs a lot of money to fix, so do it right the first time. The other thing that we looked at was social connectivity. The City of Calgary was interested in knowing what the degree of social connectivity was with different neighborhood types, because we were really recognizing that the private realm was being favored the private realm was being favored over the public realm. So we looked at different neighborhoods. We had a whole lot of methods that we were looking at, and we noticed that the population age breakdown with neighborhood type was pretty different as you go from the older neighborhoods to the newer ones, with lots of families and young kids in the curvilinear. So there's that life cycle because everybody is aging, and so these neighborhoods will go through turnovers. And we were interested in the different things that would support social connectivity. So schools that don't have any kind of public face onto the street, swimming pools and libraries that are disappearing from middle ring neighborhoods especially. And for teenage kids, where do you hang out? Where do you gather? And as I said, 100% of the population is aging, so this affects all of us. We will all go through that transition, and we need a kind of neighborhood form that's going to support our different patterns as we age. Well, after all of that, we found that there really wasn't any big punchline. Calgary, wherever you are, is fairly well socially connected. So all of those dots, they're hovering around the 10 or 11 mark, which is fairly socially connected, even though in this chart I'm showing you here, the density was quite different between the curvilinear and grid. So what we found is that we can't really conclusively prove neighborhood form and its connection to social connectivity, with the exception if you've got a kid or if you've got a dog. And a lot of the posters outside will prove this too, that if you've got a kid or a dog, you're getting a lot of social connectivity, and you're also meeting a lot of people and getting some exercise in the meantime. So the form of our cities affects our quality of life and way of life in so many profound ways. I think it's exciting that conferences like this that show a convergence of public health and urban design, and also this convergence of the development industry, the city, and the academy, that 15 years ago when I came back to Calgary, you never would have found the three of us on a stage, and we're probably going to agree with each other more than we disagree. So I'm just going to leave it with a question. Why? Why, when our mayor and council, for the most part, seem to agree with the direction that we want to go? Why, when city administration, for the most part, seems to agree with the direction we want to go? And why, with so many developers coming along who are providing some innovative ways of building neighborhoods, do we not do it yet? So I'm hoping that possibly the other panelists and questions will get to some of these answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Bev. And keep your questions for the end. We definitely would like to hear from you.